excuse me.
Participating in that at any given time.
I'm just throwing it out there as a suggestion, whether we should be asking that of people that are having events heading into the fall, or whether we should leave it to the individuals who are asking to run those events to decide what the policy should be. My personal opinion is that we should.
Well, I think at the very least, it should follow the village
CDC
policy
guidelines, yeah.
of masked if you're unvaccinated.
Yeah. But I believe the CDC guidelines now say in high-risk areas, which include Saratoga County, and unvaccinated individuals should be masking. It's not a mandate, but it's a should be. It's a health policy recommendation. Is that correct?
You are totally correct. Yeah. And we are absolutely a high risk area.
Yes.
High transmission. Yeah, I think we need to have masks for everybody. So yes.
At least until we get through these
Right.
next few months and reevaluate.
So, Tom, do we need to amend the auditorium policy to do that, to require masks?
Right now,
I would suggest
for performance,
amending the policy to say that it has to be consistent with the policy for the use of the village hall. And if you want to do something different, then yes.
Yeah,
The virtual sign says if you're vaccinated. you're vaccinated.
Correct.
So we're talking about everybody.
Right.
So
So,
I think it is better to, if we need clarity, then let's clarify.
meaning amend
Yes,
the auditorium policy?
We have different rules.
yes.
Go ahead, Megan.
We had different rules for the auditorium. This whole past season, we didn't amend the policy. We just said these are the COVID rules.
Yeah.
right? So
But things over the summer kind of quieted down. The cases were down, vaccinations went up. We didn't have the information that we have now about breakthrough infections and things like
I'm
that.
not
So,
having any
Yeah.
questions.
No, I know. I'm
I'm just saying,
yeah.
as far as amending the
Yeah.
auditorium policy, because things have changed this
Right.
few months, I don't see why we need to amend the policy. We need to say, this is the rules for right now, because this is what's going on with, there's a pandemic.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know that, you know, and then next year we change the policy back. I mean, can't we just make COVID rules? That's what we've been doing this whole time. Right. Rather than amend the policy.
Tom? Can
I,
we add something to the contract rather than amending the policy? Add a statement saying masks are required indoors?
what about, you can do that, if there's a need for flexibility here, since the circumstances change week by week. Perhaps it's better to say that the masking policy will be as directed by the liaison to the auditorium.
That's what it says. There's nothing that says, nothing out there that says, if you're not vaccinated. That's on some way still now.
Right, correct. That's what I'm saying is potentially making that change, which would be in line with, it's, again, the CDC recommendations right now are not a mandate that vaccinated individuals and people in high-risk areas should be wearing a mask, but I think it would be good policy for large gatherings to do so, personally.
If we amend policies or contracts, we're stuck with that until, at the earliest, the next board meeting. That's why I think giving a particular individual, the liaison or the mayor, the authority to make those decisions in the interim makes the most sense.
And that would be an amendment of the auditorium policy?
Yes,
Anyone feel confident enough to make a motion, say anything?
Do we have the time?
contract?
What have we done before? There was a,
We had a list of guidelines about sanitizing the space and.
right,
We had a list of requirements for carpentry and considered to be in there
Yeah.
for 5 weeks and then it will actually.
okay, so it's just carpeting.
And now that we have different events, we have, not to say a policy, but we put together, us and the office put together, basically rules and regs for if you want to come in and be part of the show, you gotta, I think we have.
So
It's
basically,
mask, I can't remember what the sign said, but it's come back and forth, but I think it was unvaccinated, have to wear masks,
Mhm.
get spread out, they were kind of, we had some posters around, but maybe we need to.
What are you looking for, Matt?
I was just trying to find the policy, the actual policy, so we could, but I would make a resolution that we amend the auditorium policy to state that COVID masking restrictions may be adjusted by the mayor in consultation with our health official on an as-needed basis.
could we say COVID restrictions as opposed to COVID masking?
I was gonna say, yes.
What,
Yes.
it could be a whole.
COVID-related health restrictions by the mayor in consultation with.
Or auditorium liaison?
Okay. Heidi, you
Right?
heavy as the crown, the auditorium liaison.
Right. So you're moving to amend the auditorium policy to add COVID-related health restrictions
Yeah.
to what, not add?
Amend the policy, amend the auditorium policy so that the auditorium liaison in consultation with our health official may implement COVID restrictions as necessary.
Good question.
This is just for discussion
Yeah.
right now.
We'll have public
We're just trying
comment.
to make a motion here.
We'll have public comment in a minute.
Okay, so,
Since I forgot about it.
auditorium policy to allow the auditorium, liaison,
In consultation with the health official.
consultation, I guess that would
To
be.
Yeah.
implement the,
COVID restrictions as necessary.
as needed basis.
Yeah.
Okay, that's your motion?
Yes.
And I'll second
Discussion?
Wouldn't it just simplify things to just say mask required for all events in the
I
auditorium?
think, to Tom's point, I think things change on a frequent basis, and so this gives a little bit more flexibility to the board to be able to adjust things as necessary. So I think that's kind of,
Change the policy once as opposed to doing it over and over.
Yes.
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 Tina?
What about
Tina,
Tina.
sorry, voting?
Yes. Yes.
Good catch, Matt. Okay, thank you, Joanne. And I skipped over public comment inadvertently, so let's go to the public comment section. Yes, sir.
I had a question about that.
State your name, please.
Jonathan?
What's the last one?
Metcalf? I had a question about that policy and also something else. But what about the religious exemptions? Like, let's say religious groups want to, a religious group or groups want to use the building, but they have, they're against they don't believe in that. Exemption.
Joanne, did you want to take this? We will follow New York State laws on that. We will not make up our own laws. Have you had any experience with that?
I'm sorry, I'm unaware of a group that has a religious exemption to masks.
I mean, in for instance, all healthcare facilities, masks are required at all times, and there are no exceptions. So I don't think that the village would be on poor legal grounds for enforcing a mask rule, because other facilities like healthcare facilities do require that, but it's, I'm sure if somebody wants to press that, then we would consult our attorney and take it from there, but I don't think personally that we would be in violation. of
They
any
just had a
free
rally
speech law.
this past Sunday at the Capitol, about 1,000 people.
Right,
Many nurses are gonna lose their jobs if they go get shot,
right,
and at least half the nurses are against it.
right,
It's very divided, even with the mask,
Right.
people believe it's not, many nurses believe it's not good for your health
right.
to wear it most of the time. So there's a lot of information and science that's coming out on both sides. And there's a lot of religious groups I know that are against the mask as well.
Well,
So-
that has not been an issue in the village so far, and since this is the village board meeting, God, I would love to keep it to village issues. And that's a potential issue that may come up, and, if it does, we will cross that bridge when we come to it.
So, what would the public comment be like if you want to request the building for a certain date? Would that be right now?
Oh, no, there's how do you want to?
We have an auditorium manager who you can contact through the website. I'm sure the phone number is there.
Could I formally request a date right here?
No.
The auditorium manager deals with all the events of the auditorium. And the liaison, the board liaison to the auditorium.
How do you formally request?
We have a paid person who manages the auditorium, who makes sure the auditorium isn't double booked and things like that.
You can go to roundlakevillage.org and there's you can follow the information on that. And Round Lake Auditorium actually has their own website.
Okay, and how late into the season does that go? I know Halloween's coming up, but how late? into the
Halloween
season?
is generally the end.
It gets pretty cold pretty quick in there.
Yeah, there's no heat.
No heat.
A lot of people are walking outside trick or treating with no heat. So.
Yeah, true. Any
We
other?
didn't finish the discussion, I believe, though, about the events for October, did we?
No. I just noticed that I forgot public comment. Trying to better myself. So any other public comments? Okay, let's go back to the old business of the Debus residents property line resolution. Tom, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, the Board of Trustees received a good deal of information, which it discussed at the last meeting. And we adjourned for the opportunity to speak with the village historian, Bill Ryan. And he and I sat down together and he put down his recollections of the past location of that, the relevant portions of the house at 11 Albany Street in an affidavit form, which has been circulated. And based upon that, I think the board has the ability to make a decision up or down on whether or not it is sufficiently persuaded that that property was adversely possessed prior to the formation of the village and the village receiving a deed from the Round Lake Association in June of 1970.
I'll make that resolution.
Tom, I wasn't here for the last meeting when this was discussed, so what should that resolution sound like?
Well, I need to know whether the board finds, based on the documentation it's received and including the affidavit, what it wants to do. And then I can formulate that resolution. But essentially, if it's denied, that's that. If the request is accepted, then that would entail the delivery of a quitclaim deed to the estate for the, I'll call them the bump outs on the 8th Street side of the property for the porch and the
Bay window,
window that, I'm sorry,
bay window.
the bay window, which starts at the ground and goes up 2 stories. And then when courts deal with this issue, they customarily provide for space around adverse possession, real property, sufficient for people to do maintenance and so forth. And the board would have to decide what it believes is an appropriate amount of land around those bump outs to include with the footprint of the porch and the bay window alone.
So would the resolution say that we accept the affidavit from Bill Ryan and other accompanying documents as being sufficient to prove adverse possession prior to the village incorporation?
Yes,
So moved. No, Tom moves it. Second,
I'll second.
Matt seconds. Discussion?
Well, I think
I think the board ought to include in its resolution how much property, if any, is going to be included in the quitclaim deed, in addition to the actual footprint of the bay window and the porch.
Recommendation being 2 feet.
I think 2 feet is safe from the perspective of the Board of Trustees.
So amended.
So, include that in the resolution.
would it be a distance 2 feet? 2 feet from the furthest point of encroachment, Tom, or 2 feet in the line all the way around the footprint of the house? Do you see what I'm saying? So
Well, it would, I would think if the board is going to draw a line, it would be a line along 8th Avenue only, not around the entire house. And it could be either from the edge of the porch or the edge of the stairs. The stairs are wooden stairs. I don't know whether they look as permanent as the porch and bay window themselves. Or it could simply be 2 feet out from the sides and front of those 2 portions of the house.
Can I speak to the stairs? We, when we were doing the construction on the house,
Jeffrey. Right.
we left the concrete stairs that were there and just put the wooden stairs over the top of it because the stairs were in that. And we didn't want to lose the footprint on 8th Street. And the sidewalk there, roughly 10 feet from the end of the stairway. So that's why when we showed the deed, it was showing a 12-foot strip because it goes all the way to the end of the sidewalk.
right. Because the image that we have on the fax here is not clear, and I don't have the initial documents that you gave to us handy. You have it right there. Not that great either. Just trying to see how much further the end of the porch steps were from the bay window. And I don't know that it's easily discernible from. Because I agree with Tom that the bay window is the more permanent structure, and so I'd like to set a limit from the bay window. However, I think it should be 2 feet from the porch steps, if you see what I'm saying. So what I think would make the most sense is to say whatever that distance is plus 2 feet from the bay window, but I don't know that I can figure that out from this.
The porch definitely sticks out further than.
Yeah, but I'm trying to discern how much, and I don't think I can tell from this
It's
map.
about a foot.
Is it? It's about a foot further?
Yeah.
So about 3, I would say 3 feet from the bay window.
Oh. So you're talking about a line along the length of 8th Street that is 3 feet from the bay window.
Correct. I think that would be, it would make more sense to use the more permanent structure as our line of delineation and then that would incorporate easily the porch steps too. So that's my opinion.
Can I make a little observation? The porch is covered by a second floor, so it's pretty permanent too.
Yeah.
And the steps, I agree with you,
Yeah.
are not permanent, but I think the porch is pretty permanent.
2 feet from the, okay, so we could do 2 feet from the end of the porch then. Yeah, that's fine.
We're gonna do a straight line.
A straight line,
Straight
yeah,
line.
straight down, it's parallel to 8th Street, 2 feet from the edge of the porch.
I like straight lines.
Yeah.
So we're saying 3 feet,
2 feet from the edge of the porch.
2 feet from the edge of the porch.
Okay. That way he doesn't go and add like some really long steps.
And can I clarify, I presume that's 2 feet from the edge of the porch where it touches the earth.
Correct.
Okay.
Hey, Kim, you got all that? I did remember to record this, so.
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
And
Yes. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thanks.
Next, short-term rentals, checklist finalization.
Discussion?
Well, there's a few things that aren't finalized on this list.
Well, yeah, there's a couple things I didn't see, maybe I can stretch. We don't want to make this transferable.
Meaning,
What do you mean?
If he sold the house, could he sell it? Can't. Do we need to state that?
Tom, did you hear that?
Nope.
If he sold the house, would these conditions transfer with the house if the new owner wanted to use it as a Airbnb?
Yes.
Cool.
Well,
But don't they have to go through their own certification process? Wouldn't they have to come to us individually? They can't just transfer all of that over?
They may need to have a new application, but the rules as to what they can and cannot do would remain the same. Those rules apply to the property and the use of the property. They don't change individual by individual.
Right, this is for any of the short-term rentals, not just this specific property that we were dealing with
Yes.
earlier. Okay.
Yes.
If they were,
No, this is, this today is just about 11 Ames Ave
Okay.
or anything else.
the way that I understand that we
Oh,
law, if they were to sell 11 A's and then somebody else were to try to operate that as an Airbnb, it would be prohibited from the get-go. Because the local law is already enacted, so by nature, it wouldn't be transferable. It's my kind of understanding of it. This is basically the 18-month get out of jail free card that would allow this particular or any previously operating Airbnbs within the village. So if they were to sell to a new owner and that person were to try to establish that as an Airbnb, it would already, as an LLC Airbnb, it would already be prohibited under our local law. That's the way
No, it is not. It doesn't qualify for a special permit.
Exactly.
And it was a person who was asking for relief, and we are granting that relief with these stipulations. So I don't see why it would transfer with the property.
Correct.
right.
You agree with that, Tom?
I'll need a summary. Gary?
I'm sorry?
Summary.
You want to
Can't-
summarize it?
That these short-term, the regulations for 11 Ames are specific to the current LLC as a sort of relief under the 18-month policy that we had, and that if somebody new were to come in there and try to operate it under a similar circumstance, it's automatically non-transferable based on our local law.
That's not the case now. These restrictions apply to the property, not the individual. Now, there may be obligations for which the owner has to sign to be, responsible. And that new owner would have to make those same commitments. But the rules aren't going to change just because the identity of the owner changes.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, you want to talk about the checklist?
So any new, if this were to happen, which I don't think it will, any new person that were to try to do that with the subject is essentially what Tom is saying.
Right.
Okay,
For the
For
18
11.
months from April 2021.
correct. Yeah,
What if the owner's gonna live there?
then it,
That's a whole other thing.
then it changes to the regular.
Then it's a regular owner occupied.
Right,
Right.
I would suggest under homeowner information, provide contact info for owner and LLC and property manager.
yeah,
By that, you mean the owner of the LLC?
Yes. And any property manager or secondary contact.
Okay, and we're providing that information to whom? Does that go to Peter? Does that go to the clerk?
Yes and yes.
I think it would make sense to have it, my personal opinion, have it for you to be able to circulate it to whoever needs it, right? Okay.
We have to say LLC, or is the LLC the owner, so it's just the owner and the property manager? If there is one. I mean, it doesn't matter what whether they're incorporated or an LLC or anything else, it's whoever the owner is, right?
This is just for 11 acres, we know it's a
Right,
policy,
it's all
so-
11 acres.
Yeah, so non-overnight guests, we hadn't come up with a final number for that.
2 per bedroom.
For non-overnight guests,
Oh, sorry.
I had suggested a number equal to the total number of guests. And I think there was some discussion that that might be too many. And I think we had floated around the idea as half as many as the total number of guests, but
Well, parking is going to
yes.
somewhat
it-
limit
it-
that.
Yeah,
Well, why do we care whether the person staying there is the renter or the guest, as long as the other restrictions, such as the number of persons in the house and the parking, are complied with?
yeah, coming in by Uber, yeah. Yeah, so you could have theoretically, he could have everybody Uber in or park somewhere else and then have a party for 50 people and cause a public nuisance. I mean, do you guys, what do you, I think personally, I feel like a reasonable number is equal to the number of overnight guests. That's my personal opinion. I don't think that that's an inordinate number of people. So if there's 4 bedrooms, that's 8 people, that's a total of 16 people. Okay, okay. I like that.
Is it easier to say no more than 16 people will be in the house?
On the property.
Yeah, that's fine. We can just eliminate non-overnight guests, say maximum capacity 16 people. But still maintain the.
Can we go up to the top under preliminary, there's a phrase that says sign off on noise law and sign off on parking laws. Can I presume that that means that simply that the owner acknowledges that they've received a copy of that?
Yes,
Okay, and there's no weddings and no corporate events. I don't think you're gonna have too many 16 people weddings, but a corporate event, if you wanted to have 4 or 6 members of management get together and, you know, spend the weekend talking over particular issues, why do we care whether it's a corporate event or?
Why would we care if it was a wedding with 10 people?
yeah, I'm comfortable striking that.
Can't we just deal with that by saying that the maximum number of people is 16?
We struck it, Tom.
Okay,
Do you want to talk about asking them to leave? I mean, is there a time?
Yeah.
That gets hard, doesn't it?
We had suggested in the last meeting, bringing it in line with the noise ordinance.
Noise and,
Yeah.
the fires that.
Yeah, extinguishing the
overnight
fires.
guests.
Yeah, so making it all,
I thought I heard Peter's voice at one point, when we were talking about 16 people maximum, say on the property. Peter, did I hear you say that?
Yeah, you did.
Okay, is that what the board wants to do? 16 on the property, not necessarily just in the structure?
yes.
Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Peter, do they have a bathroom for every, one bathroom for every bedroom?
I think it's a 4-3, isn't it?
No. This is just for eliminating.
I understand.
It's 3 bathrooms and 4 bedrooms, if you include
Okay, yeah.
include the basement as the 4th bedroom.
So it's 2.5.
Yeah.
Is something downstairs? Yeah.
What's the capacity of the driveway again, Peter? How many cars could it fit roughly?
I think 6.
6, okay. So in terms of non-overnight guest cars, I think, yeah, we're saying 4 cars total for overnight guests. 6 cars maximum. For all, 6 cars maximum for all guests, 4 cars total for overnight guests.
So it's 6 cars maximum. They all have to be in the driveway.
Correct.
And do we care whether it's a guest car or a rental car? Or just that we don't have over 6 cars?
That's fine too. So maybe
You're not going to have over 6 cars without them parking on the street.
yeah, okay. I think we should still be explicit though. Because they can park it on their own lawn.
Yeah, but so it's 6 cars, but I mean, as far as whether or
Yeah.
not it's overnight.
Correct, yeah, correct. So, but I think we should specify the number of vehicles, so no more than 6
Right.
on the property. Yeah. Did we change the liability insurance number since the last time, or did was that's in the law? Okay. Okay, I don't have any further comments.
I do, I'd like to see them take the bridge down across the over. It's not on their property,
Not on our property either.
it's a safety issue.
I agree with
You
you.
don't want to encourage people at night be carrying a kayak down, half in the bag, crossing Route 9, using that bridge.
Tom, can we require them to remove the bridge even if it's not on village property in our checklist?
I suppose it can be made a condition of granting this extraordinary relief.
Due to safety concerns. Or we don't even have to give a reason.
Yes, that's right. But I think the reason is obvious.
Okay. I think that's,
And if we were ever challenged on that, I think we'd win substantively, and especially because it's a safety related issue. We don't want people crossing the road where there's no crosswalk. And that's what the bridge encourages people to do.
okay.
And inspection by who?
Code enforcement.
Just-
Mine says that, I don't know. Oh, I see, sorry.
The one for all that sense.
The map,
We just say post evacuation plan.
ordinances.
Including each shelf. We also note again in this that this is for our law for 18 months from April 2021. Passing.
Yeah.
Is the idea to make these final edits and then pass them at the next board meeting, or is the idea to do it tonight?
Let's do it
Okay,
now.
with those edits.
Okay.
Okay,
In a form approved by the
yeah, okay,
lawyer in the town.
okay.
So we can motion.
So just to make it clear, we can't require the owner to do that simply in owning the property. But if the owner wants this extraordinary relief, then as long as it lasts, we can say that the bridge must be removed.
Okay,
At the very bottom, there's a limitation on how late they can have a campfire. I was curious as to why we care whether someone's sitting at around 11 o'clock at night, watching the dying embers and enjoying themselves.
we were talking about basically bringing it in line with the noise ordinance. So in other words, to make sure that, you didn't have 16 people out there well into the night enjoying themselves, which, you can.
Can't have that.
We don't want anybody to.
No, we don't want anybody to enjoy themselves, no. But I thought it made sense to me to add that in, because I think it does bring it in line with the noise ordinance. Certainly, if the board has objections to it, I'd be more.
I think that's very reasonable.
Yeah.
Set a time.
All right, with you there, Tom?
I'm here. I'm wondering why that would be the only property in the entire village of Round Lake where you can't have a campfire at night. But I guess it's good to make sure that we know that nobody nowhere is having a good time.
Well, they can have a good time and might as well.
Playing foosball in the basement.
This is our requirements for granting extraordinary relief. I think that's the argument. It's basically,
Oh, it's certainly within the power of the board to do. I just see things differently.
I'm going inside. I have a neighbor who regularly in the summertime has a fire out, outside. And if I have my windows open, the smoke comes in the house. We reached an agreement, neighbor and I, that at a certain time, fire goes out. I don't think that's unreasonable.
Okay, so we're making a motion?
I think you were, Patty, in the
I'm
process of it.
making a motion to, pass the short-term, checklist for names and, with the changes. What?
Uniform approved by the legislative office.
Yes, yes, of course.
For 11 names that will expire October 2022. And they're going to get a temporary CFO through October 2022.
Yes.
I'll second.
Discussion?
I'm sorry, could you repeat it? I can't quite hear all of that.
So Heidi moved to accept the short-term rental checklist for 11 names with the changes we discussed in a form approved by the attorney, granting the LLC a temporary CFO that would be, if they signed off on it, a temporary CFO that would expire October 2022.
Okay, thank you.
Just one question for Tom. Tom, are you gonna be meeting again with the attorney for the LLC?
I will provide her with a copy of this, certainly. Who will be making these revisions?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
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 Tina?
Yes.
On to new business, October auditorium events, board discussion.
We've already discussed a lot of it. Is there?
We did discuss the witches.
There was as I understand it, there was a presentation at the last meeting.
Yeah, and I think there
Yeah.
was some agreement that if it was confined to the auditorium, that we consider it. And I don't know if that was changed since then.
That was it, and to also cut back on the numbers. We weren't approving 300 people, so we said we would go with whatever the going number of people in the auditorium, and I think I just heard, or I know that it's been between 100 and 150 for events.
No.
I don't know.
I don't know where you got that information.
The proposal for the Boston Spa band program was between 100 and
Yeah,
100.
Yeah, but we haven't had that many.
But then we haven't had that.
We've got about 50 so far.
When we were here, we just asked what your numbers were, and that's what you said, it was about 100 people, is what you said you would approve, which is why we reissued stating that we were cutting our numbers from that back to be able to, and to bring it inside.
So could you give me a recap of what it would look like?
It's a benefit event, so the Boston Spa, which is, the book, it's the Witch Walk, so it's the Witch Walk Southern Saratoga County, so they're just, it's an animal benefit. And all of our proceeds go to local animal charities or animal charities of sorts, and there's a list that they can go to, and I think And also goes back to our venues that allow us to use too. So the money, none of it goes to any of those people that plan it, it all goes back to the walk itself. So, and it's not obviously a walk, it's going to be an event that we're gonna have maybe 3 to 5 vendors, or I think we have on here 4 to 6 vendors inside the auditorium, and those vendors would be things of maybe rooms or different things that have to do with, that would be a soap maker and different things of that sort. For inside, we talked about having a beer and wine or liquor vendor indoors for the auditorium, and we had talked about having 1 to 2 food trucks outside of the auditorium, which then obviously would can be utilized by the village as well as our group. But those are, go ahead.
I have the written summary of what it was. So
Oh.
it sounds like the only thing that would be changing
Was the
is
number of people.
the number of people, and it would
Being
be
indoors
confined.
or within the grounds
You
of
said-
the auditorium.
You said within the ground.
Okay. Thank
Within the grounds that we would rent.
So this is, again,
And I think for hours, I believe, we ended up changing from 3 to 8 o'clock because there was a concern about it's kind of,
and this is a private event, this is not open to the public.
well, it's a private event for, right, it's not an open door event. It's
Ticket, just
pre-sale, pre-sale,
Pre-sale, and I could buy one if I knew how to.
absolutely. Yeah. And it's really a donation, so it's a donation and they get a shirt and proceeds of any of the additional money that doesn't go towards the event and goes to the, we have a list. I listed them in the last, I think they're all there. Mr. Lowe's project, that's the vets, conservation canines, Sarah Animal Shelter. This will be our 15th year doing it, so it's.
Is it still, I think one of the things we were talking about is that really the kind of, does it still suit your purposes if it's that small? So it's-
Sure, yeah, because we're talking about doing smaller events, we have to do smaller. We want to give people things to do, but be able to do it within people's comfort levels and within whatever the guidelines are. Obviously, because we are going on a day-to-day, this isn't. So that's hence why we just wanted to know what your numbers were, so we knew that was what we could do. And then hopefully in the future, if all goes well, then we can expand the numbers in the future and it would be great. The more people we have, the more money that goes back to community, back to, all the charities. So that's our goal. It's not it's not a party, it's the benefit. So it's always been in that.
Was there a plan you guys had for parking? I forget.
Yes,
Yeah.
we were using the ball field parking. We had people that were doing and going to park, and we had people and enough for if we were to have 3. Or more
Talking about masks or no masks?
If they have to be.
And that's what we were just saying.
Yeah.
than- Or is it according to whatever is going on in the next month and a half?
Yeah.
Right.
Right, but I think you should count on that.
Right, have it advertised.
I think outside on the grounds, obviously if you got a food truck outside and things like that, people are distanced and they're, obviously you need to remove your mask to eat.
Yeah.
Understand that, but inside the auditorium space where people are more confined, if they're going buying soap or.
And if you guys have an idea, if we need to leave doors open and windows open, this has always been an outdoor event anyway, we kind of don't smell.
Right.
So if that's, I know you were still talking about one of the, something going on, that's a lot of in and out and doors open and windows open. We have no problem with that. For us, it's kind of a beautiful thing to be undercover and we've never had heat. The idea is that everybody dresses in layers and we walk in the snow and so that's not, we do it in October for that very reason, is what it is, so.
All right, so what attendance are we talking about?
I think I would be, although the Paulson high school band situation is 140. It's 40 people that are documented to be fully vaccinated, and they're to be on stage, and there are 100 audience members. So for me, I think 100 would be a more acceptable number personally. What do you guys think about it? I'm just trying to think through it rationally about people moving in and out, and being able to make, because obviously with the band thing, people are going to be seated the entire time. Hopefully distance. There's enough space in the auditorium with seats, distance with 100 people. Whereas this would be more kind of gathering around vendors and things like that. So I think err on the side of caution a little bit more with numbers.
Well, people are gonna have masks on.
Yeah, true.
And they'll be in and out doors is what we were
I mean, I'd be more comfortable with more.
Yeah.
But
What do you think, Tom?
I was thinking of,
Okay.
but I don't know that they'll get it.
Sure, the board is aware of this, and no it's just the Adrian, and I need to get the variant. But if this goes ahead, you're voting on it else, I think together. When we have this in between, in the past, we've always requested. Just consider that the decision. Whatever.
Where we work.
Since you guys work in the auditorium.
Just curious, the last 14 events were they all held in the same spot? Or
The Village of Boston spot. Yeah. We use the Legion. The Legion, and we have 2 outdoor buildings in the Legion. We use that, and we've done it
Is
in
there a reason why
ways.
you're not doing it there? Why are you-
Oh, because we got 500 people and we have spectators, and we can't pull an event off like that in a public space anymore.
What did
So
you
we're-
use Legion for?
What did we use it as a meeting space? We didn't use the indoor space.
What were you using outdoor space for?
We would check people
Why
in
why
there.
are you searching
and
for
we had-
indoor space?
We're just searching for a space that would allow an event this year, and this particular village,
Folks,
was it
Well,
you? Go
you
ahead.
really should be addressing the board.
Okay, I'm just wondering.
Oh, I thought. you
I'm
said-
just curious why I'm just curious why after 14 years they're trying to change if it's because of the size of the amount of people. Our business is smaller than the village of Boston Spa. I don't understand why they use, I think I've seen before where they create around Boston Spa. I mean, I know this is maybe a little bit, kind of a cooler place to be with the auditorium setting. I understand that, but if they're looking for somewhere to grow, I don't think Round Lake is where you should be going to grow. I think Boston Spa is a big village. Why can't they find somewhere else in the village? Boston Spa, they've been doing this whole park or whatever. There's outdoor areas all over the place. I'm just kind of curious of why they're coming here. That's
Yeah,
all.
it does seem like you're trying to downsize the event. by
We're in the
coming
midst of
here.
COVID and the pandemic, which is what you guys have been very clear about. Our event is downsized greatly because we just like to put on an event for people. So that's what we're looking for, is just having a space to be able to put on an event for people to enjoy, just like all the other small events that have started to happen in the past 8 months for everywhere. Just giving people some bit of, and it's October, and so if we can even do a small event, that's just what we were looking for, is to be able to still have that and hold that and still be able to have the benefit events. So
One thing that just contradicted exactly what you just said. You said you're looking for a place because you're getting too big to come here. Now you're saying.
we can't say that we're going to do a public
gotta do-
event in a town. Right? I don't know, I'm gonna need an answer from me, because are you understanding what I'm saying?
Just for explanation's sake, we were doing it in one place and it was a completely different
Event,
event.
yes.
Okay, you're doing it, that you want to do it something smaller, more controlled.
Exactly. And this is a
Here.
way to control it. This is a private town, this is a private venue, this is, we sell a certain amount of, or certain amount of tickets, and that's it.
In
There's
the-
no other option unless this isn't publicly advertised as we've done in the past.
So let's forget last year, 2 years ago. Say you had 500 people. Did they all have tickets and armbands or,
The 500 they did. Yes,
and
they
that was
did.
an outdoor event?
No, it's
So
all
you
outdoor.
could control it if you sold 150 tickets
Does
and
you
did
think
it in
that
Boston
everyone,
Spa.
again, we're
I
just talking theoretically. Did everybody who showed up pay to do so? Did the families that came out to watch do so? No, you're in a town, you're in a public area, you're in a park, you're in on the streets, you're on Route 50. So no, that wasn't the case. That's a very, I don't feel comfortable having an event that I run in a public place this year that would allow for the general public to flow in. Because as we're talking, there's many people that have many different opinions about what's going on with this pandemic. So if we go and say, or there's even word of it that it's going on in the middle of Boston Spa, who's to say that 1,000 people aren't going to show up because there's that many people that would love to have something, which is why we were looking for a more controlled event so that we could at least have something this year. And we thought it fit very nicely within what Rounded does, due to the fact that it is, everybody dresses up and it's within the holiday, that Boston Spa has been here for years with Adrian and watch what it is. And it's a really neat village in the fact that they celebrate and, the village in itself is unique in that way. So we thought that it was a great spot that, the building itself doesn't even need decorating to be a unique venue.
Gary,
Scott, how many cars can the ball field hold? 150 sounds like an awful big number.
The ball field, I think, maybe, I'm gonna say no more than 80, I know it's like 60. I think when we lined it out, it was 60 some odd.
60 spots.
Yes, yeah, I think it was 60.
We have like, I think we had 70 commercial.
The original idea too, Gary, just so you're aware, is that they were planning on more of an outdoor walkabout in the village.
Right.
And we had suggested that that would be not a great idea and to have it more contained. So I think they were envisioning it being more of an open air type thing. And our direction was to kind of keep it more contained because of, we don't want people wandering through the village, and there's a lot of concerns from residents, to be honest with you. I think that's the biggest concern I have here is resident concerns about the event.
But, I mean, it's sounding like a big number to me. I mean, 60 spots at the ball field, 100 people, maybe 20 vendors, maybe.
No, we just said 4 to 5 vendors. I mean, that's what our.
Every vendor has one person at it.
Vendor?
Yeah, every booth has
The
one.
numbers are all included. Those vendors, what they pay is, they're paying the same, they're paying to be part of it. There's not a vendor fee. There's not, the vendor fee is participation.
Okay. So you can add 20 spots at the Zim Smith. I'm talking 80 cars.
We've always permitted or promoted carpooling and, doing Lyft and doing Uber and things of that sort anyway, so.
I would suggest that the board is going to move forward with allowing this event and even the Boston High School event the best option. And I think you guys did it this recent weekend in terms of closing off the 2 streets to the auditorium. 3 streets to the auditorium. Well, one's a one way technically, right?
Well,
Oh, they do?
nobody should,
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to get in the habit of shutting the streets down for every event.
No, but I'm saying if we have 150 guaranteed people coming, I think it would be prudent to have some sort of traffic plan around
And
the
I
auditorium too.
would rather lower the numbers and keep the streets
Yeah.
open, because there's,
Because you're
In
worried
theory,
about
no-
people driving in the town.
It's,
This event is controlled.
yeah,
These people do not have any access to the village except for the directions that we give them,
right.
and we're sending them where
I
we need
just-
to.
In my experience, people do what they, even if they have directions, they try to get a little bit closer or what have you. I mean, just in my, I handled the parking for a lot of the auditorium events through the years, and it
Parking
does
is a
become,
major
it's a
issue.
major,
Oh,
major,
and
major
then you-
issue.
right.
Yeah, it's a major issue, and even if you do have, I mean, we've stated
What happens?
many
with-
times, you have to park here, you have to park here, and people still don't, and that's actually one of the major concerns, especially for residents that live around the auditorium, is parking with these larger events where, you know, we have events that attract 50 people, but maybe 40 of them are villagers that are walking in, and you got 10 to 15 cars. When you have a large number of cars, and we do have some events where you have more people coming in from outside the village. It's a huge, probably the #1 concern for people. And so to Gary's point, I think the parking, there's a few things to work out here. I mean, people are very, very concerned right now with COVID. I think if we, put in some guardrails and restrictions, I think and we've had events already this summer but I'm saying from a resident perspective, there's a lot of hesitation with doing these fall events. So, and I think parking is part of it, but I think the pandemic is a huge part of it also too, especially with outside events. And so I think we need to in order to do either of these events or both of them, I think we really need to seriously consider how we're going to manage both the parking situation with that number of cars, with both events to be over 100 people, and what restrictions. I mean, we agreed to doing the masking tonight, but I just think there's going to be a lot of pushback from people on these things. So.
What date was the Boston Spa band trying to?
You have that there?
27th.
10/27?
Yep. They bring their own equipment, including stands and chairs.
Amy, when were you talking about doing the haunted house with that similar thing
Well, my house happens on Halloween,
on Halloween?
and it takes us the whole month of December.
So we're saying.
Do you use the stage?
I'm not setting all that stuff up in the back if there's an event going on. I don't know, yeah, people go back there, things get lost, things get broken. It's just, we're not doing it. It's not,
She wants the space clear for a month.
it's not worth it.
Okay.
And we do have the pleasure of the tour.
Right,
So
so
we
whatever you
need,
decide.
so whatever you guys decide, we're okay. We're still gonna do this thing, aren't we?
Sure.
Which is all it is. True. Pedro, what date were you talking about?
October 16th.
What else we have in October?
Nothing, I don't
That's
think.
Lydia's event at the end of September.
September
The
26th.
Oregon fundraiser. September 26th. And, I think that's it, right?
We actually had we have a free concert on the 5th for the electricity force, so that can be canceled. So they're just doing it because you're allowing us to use the space for the 5th, if we can cancel it for next year.
October 5th or?
October 5th. But that can easily be canceled, we're looking for a time for the concert. Just to, exchange.
Do you have numbers on that? Were you anticipating a lot of people or?
I have no idea. I have no idea what shows up. I would say probably people. But I mean, if it's going to cause, that could be, I could list that as a totally mask, required. Or we can table it for next year. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, I think what we're saying is that the auditorium events need to have, people need to be masked.
Yes.
But that's not as big as some of these other ones, so we're trying to figure out, manage that. You're saying the costume contest, Joanne, you were saying that you were hesitant about that. Yes. I am very hesitant. Okay.
Well, you basically have 100% of the participants are going to be unvaccinated. So.
Right.
Well, I get it. I'm
Yeah,
just-
yeah, yeah.
I'm making a list here.
No, no,
That is your highest risk.
Yeah.
So, in the haunted house, there was a suggestion about ventilation. Have you given any thought to that?
To do any extra.
Can't really.
I mean, we usually, typically have the doors to the changing rooms open, so you go out them and in them, shut up and there's no way to isolate them.
And if you're gonna cancel the costume contest, I don't know if there's gonna be.
Right.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's the reality there. I haven't talked with him about this, but we could do something where we do more things outside. For Halloween.
Weather. Very.
I think that an indoor costume contest with all the kids on the stage is very hard. I don't know if there's a way or a will to do a different version of it that is outside or something that makes it safer. I mean, I think to cancel that 2 years in a row, I think there's ways to pull off something that's not crushing people inside.
Mhm.
So.
I can't remember who I had this conversation with, but somebody had suggested maybe some sort of costume parade where there were judges watching people along a parade and then handing out, awards after the parade, something along those lines potentially.
Right, you could almost have the, the judges stand in front of by the auditorium where the structure is, and the parade goes around and people could be around the auditorium and the judges could see the different classes just like they do on stage, but coming in front of, the judges stand. That's outdoors, people are moving around. They're not, contained within the 15, 20 minutes or whatever. It seems like a better idea, and still have the kids be able to get dressed up and get the judging and the contest and let everybody see them. The group could do the whole parade around the little circle in front of the judging stand and everybody could see them without being squished into the auditorium. I mean, I like that idea.
Who organizes the thing? You do the costume contest?
Yes, I've been part of it without me. You also, yes.
Okay, so while we're trying to figure out how it might happen, we might want to ask the people who have organized it or would organize it, whether they'd be willing to try something like that.
Well, excuse me. There is several different categories. Yes, there's like these 13 different categories with 3 winners each.
Yeah, the question was, is that something that you're interested in trying to do outside? Or did we just say this is not the year for it because it can't be done inside?
Could it be modified? Is there, it's up to you guys. You guys are volunteering your time and energy and effort, so.
It's weather dependent.
And it's what.
Yeah. If it's raining.
Snow.
We can the big tents up and maybe we can have the dance floors underneath. Maybe we can have like a little microphone set up and maybe.
That's a really good idea.
Maybe something like that.
With the outside speaker system or something. It's doable.
Can we go back to parking? I mean, there's, to me, with both of the large events, there's 2 concerns. One is managing the COVID risk. Number 2 is managing the parking. I think those are the 2 issues. And I think with the masking requirement that we have, I think that helps mitigate one of those issues. I think capacity helps mitigate that issue also. I think we need to decide what a final number on that might be. And then lastly, I think it's the parking. And even if we have some sort of a parking plan where we're going to shuttle people from first of all, who's going to shuttle who from the parking lot? I can't. It's going to be a challenge.
Well, what if we say the larger event, that all of the events can have a maximum of 100 mask attendees. I mean, it's not ideal for anyone,
Right.
but address the concerns of parking of village residents with people coming from outside.
And to get the word out there to encourage carpooling and things like that to minimize, you know.
You were going to say, you wanted to say something.
I was just curious if we were going back to the events and how you were.
You know, we're trying to just figure it out as a whole, you know, not.
It just sounds like many different things, like whether or not, I mean, are you considering
Well, there's
doing
two.
nothing in October here? That's all, you know, we were looking for, is if we
We're-
thought it was just basically us moving indoors. It was really the only reason we were doing the public, you know, parade was because Adrian, when we just discussed it and thought it would be as a way to include the village, because they have the zombie walk, things like that. So that was the only reason we were doing the outdoor part. Otherwise, we would have definitely just utilized the auditorium. So that being said, is not, you know.
No, that's
And it
fine.
just, if that indoor space is available and that space, the auditorium space is available, then that was what we were looking for.
Yeah, I didn't hear, I didn't know anything about this before Adrian had mentioned it, and you came in and, you know, I hadn't seen it in Boston Spa, and, you know, it sounds interesting, I understand what, you know, everybody was trying to do, and, but now we're trying to set a precedent for all the October events, where we don't really know where October is gonna find us all, but we have concerns. So there's two larger events, yours and the Boston Spa band. And it might be simpler just to say 100 people maximum in any auditorium event masked. This season.
Yes. Yeah, I'm okay with that. I think, again, we have to make sure that parking is solid, and ultimately we just have to balance the residents' concerns also. And, you know, I think we're doing that by providing those guardrails to the, there's always going to be people that are unhappy about everything, but in terms of any kind of events, but I think if we do this, I think it mitigates a lot of those concerns.
Ask another question. Now, most events that are held in the auditorium are usually controlled by volunteers, village residents to control parking. It falls on our shoulders. Is this something that's going to fall on our shoulders also? Is that?
I think that's actually where I'm getting at, is I think both of these events should have their own parking coordinated. For the, I believe that, I think that that's a prerequisite for this. Is that they need to have a parking plan, they need to run their parking plan, they need to have their own volunteers to do that, and it needs to be solid, and we can't have people parking in and around and on the auditorium. So, yeah, but I totally agree with you. And I think, honestly, to be honest with you, I think it ought to be something we look at next year too, with any of the larger events next year.
Yes.
I don't think it should be on volunteers within the village to run outside events all the time.
Yeah.
Great point.
Thank you.
So we're saying cap it at 100?
Okay, and we specifically say in here for parking, request to utilize the ball field parking lot for parking, possible use, parking oversight to be managed by the organization, which is us. It's understood that there will be no parking in the village, and this will be strictly enforced with additional support from our organization. So we did make that.
No, totally.
Last time.
Totally.
Okay, I just didn't know if that was
I
the
just-
first question.
I know that's
Not at
part of
all.
it.
I think it's not a concern for me in terms of what you presented. I just, I would reiterate that it is sometimes easier said than done. And so just to be aware that, just to be really tight with it is what I'm saying, because I'd love to see you guys back here in post-pandemic times and have this event. I think it's a great fit with the village in the future. And if the parking plan doesn't go to plan, I think there's gonna be a lot of hesitancy from people having the event here again in the future. So I just wanna, I think the plan is solid. I just wanna make sure that you understand that sometimes people will do what they want to do, and just to make sure that you're aware of that going forward, to make sure that it's absolutely locked down tight in terms of what your parking plan's going to be. That's all. And it sounds like it is, but just,
And it will, yeah, and it's part of your, I know.
it's just my experience, that's all.
And it would be part of the contract. We have larger events, you know, for example, we have a kids drama camp that they've been here for years and they're great, but there's parking is always a bit of an issue, and they've got their volunteers and they work on it and, you know, whatever. So we're more giving you a heads up.
Yeah, that's
because-
all. In our experience of doing these events, is it sometimes becomes an issue, that's all. And it sounds like you have a good plan, but just make sure it's locked down.
So we agreed it.
Please.
Okay.
All I want to ask is this. All I want to ask is this, please. Do we want village events for the month of October, or do we want non-village events for the month of October?
That's
That's the question.
kind of off
I
topic.
put this
Well,
question.
Because I'm seeing two different
It's
things.
kind of off topic, Sam.
I don't think so.
It seems like you're canceling the village events and allowing outsiders to come in.
Well,
So it's kind
well,
of on topic.
One of the
So
One of the events we're looking at canceling is a potential super spreader event,
Not if it's outside.
and we can still do it outside if we're going to do it, which has nothing to do with what we're discussing here. The two events that we're discussing here,
inside the auditorium.
inside the auditorium.
Except
Except for the haunted house.
Except what?
Cancel the month.
But I think that they had said.
But
I think
Eric
Eric-
mentioned that if the costume contest is canceled, it doesn't make sense to do the.
And then ventilation is basically a non-solvable issue with that space.
But even that's, honestly, you're not attending one. You have to hear that. Because everybody is masked. Yeah. That is not-
You're not there for 5 minutes, max.
You wanna go with that? Or do you think if we're not doing the contest in the same way that we do? Where does it?
I think.
Eric, could you speak up a little,
Yes,
please?
sir. I think there's two issues with the haunted house. A, there's a setup, which, yes, we asked for, which we're going to long time, it's because we all. Nobody's all the time, which is, that's all I do. So I understand what we're asking for, say, a whole month. Related to that then is the, masking or not masking. I mean, you could set that as a requirement. It's all run by volunteers. Half the time we don't have anybody at the door. So there's nobody who can enforce it unless we're going to get somebody to enforce it, which is not something. Quite frankly, I don't know if anybody wants to stand there and enforce the mask mandates, so there's shit's going on. Right? So that's another concern people have. Alternatively, and Amy and I have not discussed this, and we haven't really gotten together. Our Halloween celebration for all that goes on is pretty organic. Like, we don't spend a lot of time working with Danielle or anybody about the costume contest. She takes care of that. We set up our stuff. So there's not like a committee that runs this that starts meeting. It's all very organic. So getting together and trying to do it outside, and like obviously we do the stuff in our yard outside. Could we use some of the village property and just set up some things and lights, you know, to make the parade around more interesting? Probably without a tremendous lift. Sometimes it rains, sometimes it snows, you never know what's gonna happen. You're definitely gonna have to close the roads.
Yeah, we've done that the last few years though.
Yeah, which is
Yeah.
probably not a big deal.
Yeah.
For
As for
Halloween.
like
we
super
do
spreader
close.
and stuff like that, I will tell you, I could easily have 400 people stand outside my house. Are they outside? Yeah, but they're all standing shoulder to shoulder. And so I don't know how you guys want to balance these issues. We're willing to do what we can do, I think, is fair to say.
Yeah, I mean, if we do something outdoors, it could require setup space.
Right.
It's like, you can't just have stuff magically appear that would be outdoors on Halloween. We have to have space inside, construction space, and we'd still need to be working inside and storing it inside during the months, so.
And that's also for our stuff, then Danielle, and I know Dan and Scott, you guys have done the traditional organization of the group for the costume contest. How do you do that outside? I mean, you can, it's not like it's hard for us to talk to Danielle about how we might coordinate that and throw together some ideas. I mean, when you guys meet, this is a meeting in October.
No, maybe in 2 weeks, but, you know, we don't legislate outdoor space. I mean, the auditorium grounds are one thing,
Yeah.
but we can't have people inside.
Yeah.
We just can't.
No, yeah, and I'm.
That's our responsibility. We're gonna have to say no on that, but.
I'm looking
But, you know, or limit things as much as possible, but, you know, little kids, just, so, but the one that's closest to, if the Boston Spa Band was here on the 27th, do you think that you, and we limited it to 100, could you have some construction space inside, still allowing them to do that? This event is the 16th. This is the more the problem, I would say, would be the band.
It's still only a week away.
No, so
That gives us 1 week.
the which event is
The
the
16th.
16 weeks.
yeah, so it's like one weekend between everything.
Right, but the band that we're talking about is on the 27th.
I thought it was 27th of September.
October.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm trying to figure out how this is not so much the issue as the band. So with the band and that event, you know, so we're using the auditorium for other things too, could you have part of it for construction space?
It's fine. I mean, I mean, what we did, I mean, if you think about the space, right? You run the haunted house through the main entrance. The only key you can get into the auditorium is through the space we built. Right, so the main entrance in the auditorium from a walking standpoint, and it's not an event, the doors are open, is through that space. So it's somewhat more difficult for us to like build around it and then have people trying to get in and out, not like huge necessarily for people, but in. And he and I come to talk about this all the time as well. I personally am more inclined, I think, personally to say, well, we try to do as much outside as possible. And then, yes, taking the same point. Staging some stuff in the auditorium when we store it, because most of the time what we do in Halloween is we build stuff and hide it, and then we try to stack it up to surprise people for Halloween. So if we could try to do that again and use like a green room, maybe something.
But how many people cover those spaces? We don't know these people.
No, but, you know, to say that we're not gonna do anything else in October is hard, you know, and there's a couple of, you know,
We've had it for years, but
No, you know, things change over time.
then, yeah, if you want to evolve to that, that's fine.
Right, so, I mean, we can work with Danielle about a proposal to the practical test for this year. And if the auditorium is becoming more heavily used later in the season, then it may come down to a decision as to whether we put on something smaller, which is artistic license, we don't really want to. Right? We think it's cool, we think people like it, but we realize it takes a lot of time. Maybe it's just something that we stop doing. Or we do something. We'll have to think about it.
If you're concerned about people messing with stuff, I for one will volunteer for the Boston Spa Community Band to be there and make sure people aren't poking around.
I just think that square one on this is the point that having an indoor Halloween event like we have had in the past is not a wise decision. And so that takes away 75% of the point of doing a lot of the stuff that we're doing. Can we do it outside? Sure. And I hope we do. But I think that if we were able to have an indoor, if we were able to do a youth event indoors in Round Lake, I would love to have that event, but I just don't think we can. So I'm struggling with this personally because I want to make sure that we, you know, obviously it's be great to have as many Round Lake events as possible, but I just don't know that. I guess I don't know how to balance those two things of preserving the auditorium empty for a month when we have two people that want to have private events in the same month. So it's a tough decision for me.
Any other comments from involved parties? Danielle, this was in the classrooms.
Yes, but it was just these two groups that are coming, are they coming in free of charge or are we charging them to use it?
Sure. Standard.
We have an auditorium policy. For the
Okay.
$900 for the witch walk because it's all day. $300 for the Boston style.
What are your guys' thoughts?
It's awful hard for me to sit here and we promote this auditorium and try to make money off of it. It's awful hard to weigh shutting the place down from what's the point then of having this auditorium? And to the question of who's allowed to use it, well, our policy is open-ended in that you can come and fill out a form, apply to use it. If you meet all the criteria, you get to use it. I don't care if they're from Boston Spa, or they're from wherever Carpe Diem is from, or they're around the lake. Everybody's got an equal opportunity to use it. I get everything you're saying about the business of the crowds. Eric's absolutely, I don't know if Eric mentioned it. But you can stand out there in the street and be shoulder to shoulder with people, hundreds and hundreds of people on Lake, Fletcher, Wesley, on a good night when weather's good. It's unbelievable. I think you got to let the auditorium function as the auditorium. Maybe just set the 100 limit. I don't know if people would go for that. You have 40 members of the band, and you tell them they can only bring 60 people.
I know, I mean, I don't know what that does to, your numbers either, if you're saying, well, this will.
I think what I'm leery of now is I'm not sure what also is the policy, or by the time October comes, can we shut everything down?
Absolutely.
What's the chance of that happening?
Yeah. Where have you been the last 2 years?
This seems like there's a lot bigger issue than COVID. There's more to, so I'm just not sure. Like he's saying, I understand what he's saying, but I just, if there was more politics involved than just renting the auditorium.
I don't see it as a political issue.
Oh, okay.
No, not at all.
I think we have to make I agree with you, Tom, is that it's the auditorium. We've had events in the auditorium all summer. There are definitely some things that have changed with Delta and everything else that I think we have to address, but it's not fair on the two people asking to use the auditorium space, in my opinion, to say, no, you can't do this when we've allowed events the whole summer. And allowed other people to come in and rent the space the whole summer. I think it's,
With reasonable.
with reasonable,
restrictions.
exactly, based on the developments that we've had. So I think personally, as long as we kind of implement those guardrails, I think that we should let them go ahead. I'm still struggling on the number also because I think the major concern for me is not necessarily the social distancing between 100 and 150 people. I think it's kind of immaterial. I think it's more the parking. And so if we can figure out some way to solve for that, being that there are only 60 spaces at the ball field.
Doesn't the parking situation kind of resolve itself? There's no more spots, you think so?
Yeah.
You'd think so.
If
You should hear the
if you
office
have a
phone
joint
ringing.
parking group, and they promised they would do that, but they don't is the problem.
Well,
When they show up, they don't do it. There's no repercussions because they're only there for one day. It happens all the time.
Well, we do have Mr. Clayton patrolling, giving tickets.
Bob has been doing an amazing job.
Pardon?
I said Bob has been doing an amazing job this
So
year, but
I guess Lydia makes a good point. I would just, I guess the two applicants, I would highly encourage that they, I mean, if everybody comes in pairs, right? If you've got 150 people coming in pairs, they should be able to accommodate that at the very least. So if people carpool, it should not be an issue if people, as long as there's a solid parking plan to get people, because it's not a short distance from the ball field to the auditorium.
Because people are gonna be ticked if they bought tickets and then they can't park. So, you know, maybe we work with both groups to, as you've heard us say, Phaedra, this is really, parking is a huge concern. Because
I was under the impression that there were huge events that were held in the village then, I mean. I
No.
thought there
huge
was
is, huge is, I can tell you the number of times I've seen it.
With the antique festival and markets and other large scale events, residents rent out their space in their yards to have people park, and then the fire department also charges for people to park
How
in their
many
space.
people did those events bring in that you need that much more parking?
They bring in a lot of people.
Thousands.
Yeah, which, and by the way, we can't, we
That's
have,
why I'm just having a hard time.
No,
wondering
Yeah.
why-
there are also people that are here for an hour, then leave, and somebody else comes. So it's,
I would regularly put 60 cars on my lot.
Yeah.
For years.
That's why I thought
Just
there were
one.
huge, otherwise we wouldn't have even approached the village for any of this, because if it's an issue with that much of an issue.
those are fundraisers for the village too.
it's a big issue.
You know, the Wooden Walk never, so we never said we weren't paying for this. So I think there's probably a lot more. I mean, possibly we should approach this next year for you guys,
We
maybe.
could, I
I
mean,
think.
parking, between COVID and parking, I mean, we do want events in here, have events in here, and we need to work on parking. Parking is always an issue, so we try it this way, we try it that way, and we build it into contracts. People say, look, I know I'm gonna have more people than 50. I say, okay, you need to make sure you have some people volunteer, you know, that are standing out there and doing it, because it becomes a problem, and then, you know, people, and to Amy's point, you're one and done, and then people are like, you know what, we are excited about having, the auditorium used
No,
in those
our
ways.
goal was to hopefully have an event that the village enjoyed and wanted to have that. We weren't looking for a
Absolutely.
dime.
No, and I heard that too.
Oh, okay.
And I am not, and you don't have to answer for everybody who ever messed with the parking in the auditorium, but we're just saying.
It just feels at this point now.
It does. I know it does.
Okay, so and that's fine, like, all I need is for somebody to say, no, we aren't looking for that, and then I'm fine.
No,
But
I don't feel that way,
We're
but
not-
but we do need to, as you
Okay.
said, guardrails.
So, okay, I think 150 people total is an acceptable number personally, as long as the both groups highly encourage carpooling and let it be known that there is at most about 60 spaces available. And so highly encourage people to come together where possible, or Uber or Lyft. you know, would be great. And then the COVID policies that we enacted earlier in the workshop, masking, everything else.
You have the trailhead, but at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it may be a little crowded. At 7 o'clock at night, there won't be anybody there. So that's another, what, 30,
I think it's 40.
40 spots?
There's 12 spots right there in Burlington Avenue that are open to both parking.
There's public parking by the lake.
As long as people don't park here, that,
Yeah,
you know, it's not, that's the big problem, basically. As long as people don't park around the auditorium, no, you know, that's basically the major concern. So, do we have to, what do we have to do here? We don't, I mean, basically, are we approving, what are we don't have to make a resolution
We're
approving
not,
these
there's an
events.
auditorium manager.
Yeah, exactly. We're just giving our blessing.
Right, we're just saying, these are the conditions we'd like to put on
Okay.
it. This is the
Fine.
number of, please, you know, we need a parking plan, this is the maximum number, and we're gonna say masks, and hopefully that's all COVID asks of us.
So we're saying 150?
Unless you want to make it less,
I think honestly, I mean, the Boston Spa event has asked for 100 plus 40. I think we had said 100 to 150 for Phaedra. I think there's no material, to me anyway, from a health policy, and there's no material difference between 100 and 150 people in that space. I think the major difference is parking. And so as long as we solve for the parking, I think it's not, I think 150 is reasonable and will help you raise more money for the charities that you're working with.
A cap of 150, that's all really.
Hard cap, 150.
And
that's capped at 150.
that would mean capping the tickets at 150, tickets sold at 150.
And the same with the Boston.
Right.
So for them, it would be 110.
Right.
And then if Scott's having his event, you never get that many.
No, I mean, I wouldn't think I would. I'd be happy if I would, but without a doubt it. They're mostly probably be village residents supporting the police.
Mhm.
Leads there. That's why I say I'm a lead.
Oh.
Does that address your concerns, and then you can talk with Adrian?
Whether we want to go through with it or not.
Right.
Right. All right.
I think this horse is sufficiently flogged.
Yeah.
Oh, boy,
we
yes.
got it.
Any correspondence? Mr. Village Attorney, any words of wisdom?
He's on mute.
Nope. The village mayor has no words of wisdom.
He's on mute. He's just talking. Tom, you're on mute.
Oh. Better not just say no now. Do you have any words of wisdom, Tom? I think you're still muted.
See you in a while.
There you go.
I have no words of wisdom.
You could have just shaken, shook your head. Village trustees, comments?
Just that, NICEAG got back to us today with a contract for the mayor to sign, so he's gonna be going over with the attorney. That's it.
Okay, and breaking news, he has approved it.
Oh, good.
We'll be moving on the streetlight replacement project. And Tina, comments?
Nope.
Public comment?
I do believe in the future, and I do believe that COVID and what's going on is absolutely affecting the way that we're running on. I do. And she's even, the woman that wants to come and do it, with it was, well, when the same thing, she wants to downsize, she only puts out inside the building, she can't find something that she's trying to alter for COVID. I think we're going to fix it. we're gonna figure out a way to bring people in. It's not like I don't want to bring people into our village, or anybody else in the village wants to. We need to control it better. There's ways we can control it better, and I think we're gonna get it done. I have nothing against bringing people in. I do think we should be making money. We were losing money this year.
Yes.
In 1 month. Okay, we're paying people $1,000, we're bringing in $300. Okay, we're losing. We're not making any money this year. And that's with booking, supposedly booking, events. The events are bombed, and maybe that has to do with COVID. Everything has to do, everything kind of coincides this year. I think we're gonna fix it, and I think it's gonna be better. I mean, we're gonna figure it out, be able to hold events and make money. So,
Yeah, it's not, the last few years before COVID, the events were bringing in more money than we've ever had. And we upped this budget, and the money that was coming in was more, and it's like, okay, good, now we're getting on the right path a little bit. We've got to strike a balance, but the auditorium is not going to support itself by village events. We need, that's a big expensive structure. So it
and
was.
that being said too, where were we making money?
The
3 years
amount-
ago, we ran a profit.
Absolutely. So the expenses for the auditorium, like in budget expenses, how much it costs for the manager, for cleaning, for things like that versus the fees that we were getting there was a profit. But obviously, it's not a profit to take care of the whole auditorium. I mean, that's a huge thing. But we're working toward this. That's why we have a master plan. That's where we have a direction to bring this forward so that it takes care of itself one day. But,
No, I was just wondering why one event is $900 and what is.
It's all day,
It's a full day.
5 hours versus 3 hours.
it's part of the auditorium policy. So, then COVID happened. And people aren't going to anything. I haven't been in a restaurant in a year and a half. So, maybe some people, and I haven't been to a musical event either. So I think this has changed people's behavior.
Sure.
And this is not a surprise that there would be a loss this year. So if we have some opportunities, people are willing to do it, it's not extreme, it's okay, they'll change it from 300 to 150 people, and they'll follow our guidelines, I think that we should do it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree, which like I'm saying, I don't want to make it look like we don't want to bring people from the outside, absolutely.
No, I know you don't. I think there's a lot of people that feel that way, which is unfortunate because I think it's such a great space and so many people say, man, I never knew this thing existed. And for me, it's like, me personally, I think I'm proud as a resident that we have this great space, and I would love people to utilize it, and I would love for it to pay for itself and be able to, we have millions upon millions upon millions of dollars of work that needs to go into that thing. So if we could make a few $1,000s of profit a year, so be it.
It didn't, for years, it didn't make a profit at all.
Right.
And going to your point on I've heard a number of times, I can't tell you how many times, not from you guys, because you guys are very active. People saying they don't like outsiders in Round Lake.
Right.
At the same time, you have this venue that you want to use for entertainment, but you can't have it both ways. You can't just say there's not enough going on in the village to support the place.
Most villages don't support it.
Right.
They never show up at events.
Yeah, but they also are taxpayers and own this building, so they should have a say.
Right, but it could also just crumble into the ground too,
Yeah.
because that is, as you said, millions of dollars worth of renovations, restoration needs to be done.
Right, which comes out of our taxpayers' money.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Every dollar that we don't sell in a ticket is a dollar that a taxpayer has to pay in us as a village, paying out to those performers, paying out to the auditorium manager, every single dollar. So if we have an opportunity, and I know you don't disagree with me, if we have an opportunity to claw back some of those dollars and offset what people are paying as taxpayers, with a reasonable plan with reasonable restrictions.
That's a perfect great question, look forward to, what are we trying to get out of this building?
Right.
Is this a money maker? Because I thought, are we trying to make money in this thing, or are we just trying to entertain village and show our face off? I mean, that's one thing we have to work for.
Yes.
That's confusing me. I don't, because if you bring money in, if we bring $500 into an event, we make $500 in an event, it's kind of like,
Well, I think that's kind of
Doesn't make it
a bigger issue.
You could ask 600 people in this village and get 600 different opinions.
Different opinions. Matter of fact, there's a survey, I haven't seen the results yet, but there's a survey on this, you know.
About 50% of people don't want it to be used for anything outside of village activities.
Right, yeah, I mean, well, that thing, when I can only go back to when I moved here and then I got on the board, that was a pretty much an eyesore. It was, the windows were broken, the foundation was all cracked and squirrels were running all over it and bats and everything. And how many grants over the years? You know, how many grants over the years? And that's just addresses the building. You know, just to have a building. But then what do you want to do with it?
Right.
You know, do you want to put people in the seats? You know, I don't know.
Oh, it just took a grant and put AV equipment in for, you know, what's that, $80,000 for that AV equipment?
The
My
seats, the
God,
chairs.
That's not for us.
$150,000 for the chairs, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
Why is that not for us?
We are part of that. We're certainly part of it, but it's not just for
Oh, I
us.
know it's not just for us, but some.
You just replace the seats, of course. Of course, we're included in that, but I'm saying it's not just for 600 people. We just spent $150,000 on that.
Yeah.
You know,
Brand.
to that will hopefully, when we're talking about the master plan and applying for grants and getting, you know, so we could spend.
Which all of this comes down to the big $1 million question. We need to do something. We can do all the talk we want to do and bring in people that are going to fill those seats. How do we get these people into the village?
Yeah.
Without causing a mess?
Right.
That's
And
the number one issue. We keep going back to the same issue. That's the one issue. Number one thing we got to do.
It is, but also, can it, of course it can be fixed.
I think we should double the size of the parking at the ball field. I think that's, you know,
Absolutely.
we could go right down it. We could go, there's plenty of space to expand there. I think that's one of the things we could definitely do. And we need to.
We were told when Dixie was in office that we could not park on that area because it was a sewer line. You know, we told them, I'm told why they'd be parked at public work, but that's not true.
Yeah, we can expand, but I think that's what, but you look at like a venue like SPAC, right? People walk 3/4 of a mile from their parking spot to get to the venue, and then people here won't walk 10 feet. So I think we need to make that, and again, it's a long discussion, but I think we need to figure all that stuff out, so.
But Scott, didn't a couple of years ago, we had some kind of plan to double that?
Yes.
The money ran out.
But it was not, it was not even a fraction of the cost of what it cost to expand it. But I think that's something that we ought to look at is expand, you know, if we can expand the amount of parking there and then use the golf limo.
Sublet possibilities for satellite lots, like the churches both have big lots,
Yeah.
which aren't used in that time of
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
We have at least one trolley, we have, I mean, we just make a plan.
Right.
And execute it, and it could be part of the fun of coming.
Yeah.
You know, you get this cool trolley. ride.
Yeah, little trolley stops and all the rest of it.
Well, I
Yeah,
think
no.
once we figure it out and try, you know, we keep trying things and then eventually we'll get it. And then when people want to come and say, we say, this is what you have to do. You know, this is where you're gonna park and this is who's gonna do it. And, you know,
It can't be built on the backs of volunteerism. That's the big problem. There's so
Absolutely
many people
not.
have given so many hundreds of hours of their time, and we have to have a formal plan, and whether that's a paid position within the village or somebody that handles the events.
We have a good plan and mechanisms for implementing it. I think staffing it would be, I mean, it would also have to be part of the plan, but it's kind of hard to get volunteers, like, I need volunteers this night, that night, that night.
Yeah.
You know, nobody quite knows what they're supposed to be doing,
Right.
where to direct people or anything. I mean, that's just a big part of the whole.
But that's certainly worth a discussion. I mean, this is the point of using church parking lots. We're gonna be talking to the churches.
I did.
We did for Jade. We used the trolley and got to talk to
That was
Methodist.
very good.
They're all good with doing that. I mean, other than the Methodist Church has a, they use it as a workflow for.
They never bought it.
But
They
they
refused to walk.
They, yeah,
as far as parking, as far as volunteer parking, having people volunteer also, depending on how many events, I actually think we're stacking way too many events in a long time for volunteers. I mean, in the future, if you're gonna book an event, I think they should be responsible.
100%.
If this works out, where this girl comes in and she can actually control parking and have it work, which, you know what, I'm highly skeptical of it. I'm sure everybody is. It's just because, you know, it never works, but if we could make it work, or even have them hire a company to come in and do the parking on their own and park as a part of the deal with using the building, then I think it could work. I mean, I just think we're putting way too much on volunteers.
Yeah.
I don't think we've ever had a concerted effort to solve the parking issue.
No.
Because until recently, we haven't had enough or big enough events so that we really want to sit down. and
It's
figure it out.
it's a little bit of a catch-22 too, right? You can't have a big event until you solve for the parking, and we haven't solved for the parking to get the big events. So, you know, I think
We need to have some options.
yes.
If you know ahead, that's just the thing is I think if we come up with a plan and try to get it all in place for the winter for next year, have it
Yeah.
all done and all set.
Yeah.
Then we can go in and
Yeah.
we can tweak things as they go along.
Yeah.
You can, as long as you know what's going on ahead of time, just like an antique festival, every event should be treated like a festival.
Yeah.
Let's figure it all out, figure out where the parking's gonna be. If you have to bus people in, look at the light show they do down at the first responder. They bus people in from
Right.
different areas.
From the church.
We used to do that, we used to use the parking lot of the it can work, it's just that you need to have that.
but that, those were big events and.
Yeah. And like I said, like how you just said, we're putting a lot of money into this building. It does has the potential of bringing in a crowd of 400 people, 300 people, we can do that. As long as we plan it and have the busing system. And, you know, to do something like that, I don't think it's not something that can be done. I do. You can have a big event, but you have to plan that ahead of time. You can't rely on, is anybody gonna come? Have ticket sales, know how many people are coming, just like you would in any other concert.
Yeah.
And then figure out the idea of, okay, how are we bringing people into this? And they know ahead of time that they can't park in here, everything's gonna be blocked off. It's like you go to the racetrack. You're not gonna park in front of the racetrack to go to watch a race. You know that you're gonna have to park out in this parking area. You either walk in or take in some kind of show. So.
Yeah, I think the parking plan has fallen short at times. I have personally worked with the auditorium and on the parking committee for years, trying different things, some of which really didn't work well. You know, it was even one of the years we said, let's let people park on the lawn, see what happens, right? See, does it need to be reseated? Were people so stupid that they put big ruts in there? It didn't happen. But it wasn't enough parking, you know, people wouldn't park the right angle and, you know, whatever. Okay, so that didn't work. But I mean, that was, and now we have decided no one should ever park around the auditorium, and we put the signs up. There's a lot of parents who seem to ignore that stuff. So, and, you know, but we have read the Riot Act to Carpe Diem and the, you know, youth orchestra that used to come here and that. Now we just need to make sure that we have a plan that works somewhere else. And once people get used to it, we know what we're doing, we can just tell them to do it and do it.
I just want to say what happened this last event. We had a little car show here. So what we did, we went and we literally talked to everyone around the auditorium and people who not necessarily lived behind the auditorium, lived out there that used the parking spots in here. We had a car show.
Anyone from Burlington Avenue back, all residents from Burlington.
So I made signs that said resident parking. Resident parking was the people who had their own parking spots by their house, like here.
Unofficial.
Yes, unofficial parking spots. They had a resident parking. people who use the library to the auditorium, we gave them numbers, along with Amy Brader and her husband and Ellen. They all had numbers. We had 10 numbers, because 10 people used those spaces back there. And they had them in their little car. And when they came through, the kids knew they lived here. So besides the 10 and the resident parking and the closing up of the streets, it really worked out well.
We use the colony.
And the colonies, yes.
And the Collins, and that sounds like a very good idea. I don't know if we could do that all the time. Closing the streets, what was it, the artisan? People went nuts about closing the streets in a board meeting here.
But it ended up not being a problem.
Well, we talked them down, and we said we could give you a resident thing to put in your windshield.
Yes,
And we'll move the cones when you come by.
that's what we did. We had 2 little boys doing it. We had the colony kids.
There was a guy who told me personally, a resident, who I said, did that sort of work for you afterwards? I said, does that address all your concerns? He said, I wanted a beer that weekend. It's just about my rights. And I was like, what?
We need one of those little arms, you know.
It worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
No, you guys did a great job.
It
Tip
worked.
of the cap to you guys.
All
I
right,
will make a
anyway,
motion to
good
adjourn.
discussion, yes.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you all.
All right, bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Good night.
Good night.
On platform today, we'll probably use that again.
Well,